I was on the Bloomberg on the HDS function. I think you have a very small holding in Tesla, maybe 13,000 shares or so. So clarify that for us. But your reaction is somebody that has exposure to that name and Elon Musk forming a political party. How do you react?
Well, very quickly, so Simplify has a 2x levered variant of the Tesla fund that provides access to that. It is a very small fund. As an investor in Tesla, however, I would argue that this is not so much a choice that he has, but almost an inevitability at this point. He has managed, Tesla is very closely, as is SpaceX and related businesses from Elon Musk. They're very heavily tied into the political allocation machine, whether that is the Department of Defense and NASA through SpaceX, or whether that is through the environmental credits associated with Tesla and solar. You know, this is a business that is deeply tied into the political framework. And at the end of the day, unfortunately, Elon Musk has now managed to basically alienate both Democrats and Republicans. Democrats by aligning with Trump initially and the anti-woke movement. And now, of course, Republicans by breaking with Donald Trump and launching the American Party. I've drawn the analogy that this is much more like William Randolph Hearst than any form of traditional technologist. He's largely known at this point for his political and communications empire in the form of Twitter, right. The town square. You know, that really seems to be setting the tone here, whether he is establishing
as opposed to being the key inventor or the technical brain himself, right? Like the thing that we always go back to is that in many annual regulatory filings, in the boilerplate, they'll put Elon Musk is essential to this company. And if anything were to happen to him, that would be to Tesla's detriment. But as I know, I've reported a lot on it, right? There are many talented and influential and impactful people at that company. Even so, there is an element of key man risk from Tesla's own perspective. It's in the filings.
Yeah, at the end of the day, the Tesla buyer is suffering from their car being keyed in a parking lot, not because of the technologist, but because of the chief executive officer and a leader of the company. That is clearly a risk, both from a management standpoint and a talent acquisition standpoint. He is a transformative figure to many in the technology space who dared to actually build stuff in a technology world that was largely focused around consumer apps. But he is not the inventor. He is not the key technologist. What he is the key spokesperson. And so the underlying behavior that is occurring here, it's not entirely clear that he has a choice to back away from the political sphere, given the exposure that his businesses have. Whether this is reckless or not is ultimately going to be determined by the history books. We can't really know the influence, but with a deeply divided electorate, the threat of a third party does have the potential to disrupt elections, primarily hurting Republicans much more than it would likely hurt Democrats.
This is a global company as well. And Michael, we've seen the impact in Europe that Musk's political affiliations have had. You then think about China, where real growth engine for them, but maybe China starts to look at the lessening in political weight that Elon has had with the administration, backs away there, and then you got competition. Do you remain as exposed to this name, as little as it is?
Well, ultimately, we have a fund that is dedicated to Tesla. So we will buy that just based on whether shareholders want exposure to that name or not through that fund. But at the end of the day, this is a business that for the very first time in history is actually looking at the potential for a sales decline. It has had extraordinary success in a few models. The Model Y was obviously a huge runaway success. But it has an aging product mix. It has significant new competition, particularly from Chinese companies coming in. And this is, of course, creating conditions under which the business itself is very much under threat. It has always been a bit of a mystery from a valuation standpoint. And so it's very hard to create a compelling argument for why you should be aggressively buying Tesla now, other than the desire to gain exposure to a very high volatility, high beta name, which has been one of the key characteristics that have attracted people to it over time.
Yeah, Michael, give us the signal that you're getting from those that have wanted to get into your fund, that have wanted the exposure to the volatility or to the mystery around Elon Musk in and of itself. Is that waned in any way in the current political environment?
We haven't really seen it wane in any meaningful way, but the reality is that most of these levered ETFs are simply offering investors a tool to access lower cost leverage than they could obtain through a margin account. You can get a 2x levered exposure at a fraction of the cost once you factor in management fees and the cost of the leverage that can be obtained in the institutional space. It's much less expensive than trying to obtain that through margin or through options. And so the argument is very compelling. If you want that levered exposure, the question is ultimately, do you want levered exposure to a business that really has gone somewhat X growth and is now looking at a situation in which those political liabilities, both in China, where it's perceived as an American company at a time period where that's probably not particularly attractive, Europe, similar phenomenon, and as I mentioned, growing competition in the United States, as well as the political headwinds, make this a very challenging environment for Elon Musk.